Alright guys, Murph's here, and today I want to go over the anatomy of a shotgun shell. What I find very interesting about shotgun shells is they have a lot of very individual terms that you don't really find with a lot of other ammunition types out on the market. Pistol and rifle caliber designations and parts and all that kind of stuff kind of have the same overall themes, but shotguns are a little more outdated in some of their terms, and they're very individual. So that's what I want to spend a little bit of time kind of going through today, some of the individualized aspects of shotgun shell designation. Coming down to start out with gauge. Now, caliber and all that kind of stuff and rifle and pistol bullets is designated by bore diameter. Now, whether or not that measurement is taken from the tops of the lands or the bottom of the grooves doesn't necessarily matter. It's still bore diameter and then also a reflection of case length. At one time in black powder type cartridges, you would have taken into account the powder load as well, 4570, 4590, all those types of things. But shotguns do it just a little bit differently. It's still based around bore diameter, but the process of getting there is a little weird. So what you would do, if you, let's say you built a shotgun from the ground up right now, you forged every little bit of it. You would determine the gauge by taking a measurement of your bore and then getting lead weights at that diameter, whatever it is that diameter might be, and a predetermined thickness, and you would stack those lead weights together until they equaled 1 pound at that diameter and the predetermined thickness. That is how you determine gauge. So a 12 gauge took 12 of those lead weights in order to be able to equal 1 pound. Kind of weird, right? A very roundabout way to go about determining gauge. However, that is the process that is used. Now, that changes when we talk about 410 bore. For 410 bore, we're actually talking about bore diameter, which makes 410 bore kind of, it's why you don't refer to 410 bore as a gauge as much as by bore. That's where that terminology comes from there. Now, you could pick up pretty much any box of shotgun shells right now, and you'd probably see that it indicates that they are plastic shells or plastic holes. And for most people, they, especially anyone in recent memory, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, duh, of course it is. However, that was not always the case in shotgun ammunition. Early on, once we had self-contained cartridges, a lot of times they were utilizing some type of wax paper hull. Now, of course, those don't necessarily stand up to all environmental conditions, so it was not infrequent to see them replaced by brass case cartridges, depending on where you were. The United States military would use brass case cartridges during World War I and World War II in order to be able to withstand the actual battlefield conditions, mud, water, all those types of things. Now, plastic has pretty much become the ubiquitous option. However, you do occasionally run into brass shotgun shells. I seem to remember that there was a Russian importer who was bringing in a 410 brass cased slug not that long ago. Now, going from there, let's go ahead and talk about shot cups. What is a cup? Or wad in this case? Well, a shot cup used to be a bunch of cardboard discs between the powder and the shotgun shot. Now it's an actual plastic cup that contains the shot and dumps it as soon as it exits the bore. And the purpose of this cup is to make sure that there's no gas blow-by through the shotgun shot. Shotgun shot being fairly loose in the bore and all that kind of stuff, there's a possibility that gases will seep past it, and then you won't get necessarily the full velocity or potential out of your shotgun load. When you consider that a lot of shotgun shot is awfully small and therefore doesn't carry a whole lot of energy, it kind of needs every bit of velocity it can get. Now, from there, let's go ahead and start talking about shot. What is shot? Well, shot is the pellets that's loaded up into the shotgun shell in shot shell type setups. You can also get slugs or buckshot, which still coming back into shot, but slugs, which are a single projectile. Now, if you look at boxes of shotgun shells, you'll see that in shot shells, you'll see some type of number association utilized to be able to tell you what size shot it is. However, what that number means is a little bit misleading. Now, there's a couple different ways you can go about determining this number. It kind of depends on where you're at. The Europeans have a standard, the British have a standard, Australia uses a blend of pretty much everybody's standard, and then of course we have the American standard. Now, the American standard has a relationship with the 0.1 or the 17 designation, I guess I should say. It ultimately boils down to 0.17, but in order to be able to determine your shot size, you subtract it from 17. So if I have number 9 shot in a target load, I subtract that from 17, and now I know what my shot diameter is. Interesting, right? But Murph, there's also letter designations that are involved in shotgun shot. So how do you subtract letters from numbers in this case? Well, guys, that's where things get a little more complicated and we need a chart. Once we get to 0.17 diameter, we still have shotgun shot that's bigger than that. So how do we designate that in a maybe less complicated manner? Well, now at this point, you just have to know the shot diameter. Once you get into B's, T's, and F's, now you've started moving past the 0.17 and everything is moving up. And it's a lot easier to just refer to a chart in order to be able to understand what your actual shot diameter is. And that is what brings us into the aughts, number 4 buck on up. These are once we get to kind of 27 caliber, moving on up from there to where double aught is 32, 33 caliber, somewhere in there. All this shot diameter is important to you for a couple of reasons. 1, making sure you're pairing the appropriate load to the target that you're going after. And 2, giving you an idea of how much shot is in the shot cup to begin with. Obviously, the smaller in diameter we go, the more shot load we have on board. However, as we go up into the double aught buck, now we have only 9 .33 caliber projectiles in order to be able to expend at any single target. So perhaps small, fast-moving targets are not the best use of buckshot as opposed to some number 4 shot or something along those lines. That's kind of how you got to think about that in those terms. It's complicated, right? Shotgun dynamics, shotgun nomenclature is weird. Now from there, we get into powder charges. And this is where things get interesting yet again. Now, on most of your modern production ammunition, you're just going to see velocity indicated on the box. However, you might see a term called Dram thrown on there as well. What is Dram or Dram equivalent? Well, prior to the advent of smokeless powder, shotgun shell boxes would indicate the powder load in a measurement of Dram, which is another kind of archaic measuring system. And these are obviously black powder loads and all that kind of stuff. And the idea was that you could communicate to somebody how much recoil or what the performance aspects of the cartridge were going to be based off of that powder load in drams. Well, once we hit the transitional period into smokeless powder, we aren't necessarily measuring in dram anymore. And this is where dram equivalent comes in, because you have your shooters that are moving over from black powder shotgun shells to smokeless powder shotgun shells. They still need to be able to associate their previous performance capabilities with the new powder. So that's where dram equivalent comes from. Kind of an interesting little dynamic there, right? Now, you also might see terms thrown around such as low brass and high brass. What does that refer to? I've got a couple of shells here to be able to show you. So here is some high brass buckshot. Here is a low brass target shell, number 9 shot. Okay, well, why are these different lengths in the actual shell? Well, this comes from the amount of powder that's in each one of these. Now, if I take this and I load it with this amount of powder, what'll wind up happening is burn through on the actual shotgun shell casing. Now, this was probably a bigger issue in cardboard shells, though I would imagine it's not that much better in plastic. And the problem becomes if you burn through this shell, you compromise its structural integrity. There's a good possibility that in some sort of repeating type action, pump action, semi-automatic, whatever it is that it may be, that burn through might cause the system to gum up. It might cause the shell to lengthen and all that kind of stuff as extraction is trying to occur, and then obvious malfunctions and all that kind of thing. Going to be a pretty big issue, right? But in addition to that, it could also put you in the condition to have a bore obstruction. So basically, you just wind up ejecting the base of the shotgun shell, leaving behind the rest of the shell body, which means that when you load in another shotgun shell, you're going to attempt to force that shell body down the barrel if you even manage to get the shotgun shell in the battery. This could potentially cause a overpressure event in your barrel as both the new shot load and the previous shot hole try to make space happen inside of the barrel. Now, generally, your low brass loads are going to be some type of target load, and your high brass is pretty much always going to be some type of hunting or defensive load. All right, guys, so that's how that process works there. What about shell length? You'll notice on a lot of shotgun shells that they indicate how long they are, 2 3/4, 3 inch, 3.5 inch. Where does that come from? Well, that is going to be paired to your shotgun's actual chamber. Now, once upon a time, shotgun shells as short as 2.5 inch were actually not unheard of out on the market. However, now the market is more or less standardized in 2 3/4, 3, and 3.5 inch, and that kind of depends on what shotgun shell you're using as well. I have yet to see a 3-inch chambered or even 3-inch shotgun shell for a 16 gauge, but I have still seen 2.5-inch 410s. Those are your kind of go-to target load out of the 410. They come in 2.5 and 3-inch lengths. Now, 10 gauges are pretty much stuck in the 3.5-inch shell. There are shorter than 2.5-inch shells in the 12-gauge load out on the market. These are Aguila mini shells. They come in at just under 2 inches. Now, a lot of people like these shells because they make up for a lot of capacity in a tubular magazine. However, you also wind up running into some other issues with overall shot load, velocities, impact on target, as well as function. So it's kind of troubling when your ammunition choice has like charts out there in order to be able to represent what the shotgun shell will operate properly with and what it won't. So something to consider there. All right, now the last thing is primer. Shotgun shells use a 209 primer, which is a very large primer, which helps make sure that it gets the proper burn and all those types of things. Kind of like the difference between, you know, pistol primers and large rifle primers and all those types of things. So, all right, guys. I think that pretty much covers this conversation overall. I hope you guys found this kind of illuminating overall as to where some of our terminology in shotgun shells comes from. But aside from some channel updates, that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day. All right, guys. If you guys enjoyed this content or you've enjoyed other stuff that I put up on the channel, Murph's Law has a Facebook page as well. So if you're wanting more interaction with the content, if you're wanting more access to me, or you want to be able to have like discussions and debates with other like-minded people, go ahead, check the description, hit that link to the Facebook group and go ahead and join. We'd love to have you there, and you'll be able to get, you know, behind the scenes content, updates, all that kind of stuff, and be able to interact more with this forum. All right, guys, now that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.